D&D in space sounds awesome, but can the new box set deliver on that promise? Let's talk about Spelljammer Adventures in Space. The original Spelljammer box set came out in 1989, and it's just recently been updated to 5e with this big old box set that I've been very excited to dig into. But I should say, for the purpose of this review, or actually it's not a review because I haven't run this game. This is just, let's call it a first read-through impressions video. That sounds good. This is my first time interacting with Spelljammer, so I'm not familiar with the old second edition version or anything that came after it. I'm just extremely intrigued by the idea of Dungeons and Dragons in outer space. So let's break these books out. The box set comes with a really pretty DM screen, like a full crazy astral battle adventure thing going on here. Like, it's pretty awesome. The inside has some maps and some helpful rules, and then most of it is just encounters. And actually, all of these random encounters and stuff are pretty good, even though the tables are a little difficult to look at. But the real meat of the box set are these 3 64-page books: The Astral Adventures Guide, Boo's Astral Menagerie, and The Light of Xerxes, which is an adventure. We'll get into that in a little bit. So usually when I do these videos that do an in-depth look at a book, I usually do them because I'm super positive and excited about the book. And I want to start this video off saying that I am very excited, like I said, about D&D in space, but I don't think these books are perfect. And I think it's actually still worth making a video because I think we can learn something as dungeon masters and maybe even players by taking a critical look at these books. Okay, let's start with the Astral Adventurer's Guide. This book is, I think, what you would give to your players to sort of get them psyched about playing in a Spelljammer game. So it's mostly player-facing rules, but it's also kind of a setting book as well. So there's some first adventure hooks here. And this was the first book that I read through. Like, there's some killer art in this stuff. So this piece of artwork kind of represents 4 of the new player races, which I think, let's jump right into it and talk about that. So this book has 6 new races: the Astral Elf, the Autognome, the Gif, the Hadozi, Plasmoid, and the Thrykeen. And it does have the updated ability score increases that you just get to assign however you want. This book is an improvement on the race stuff, but I still think they've got a ways to go. We've been talking a lot about the 1D&D stuff, and I'm hoping that Wizards of the Coast is hearing what a lot of people are saying about how to make this stuff better, because I still think they can do a better job. It's just kind of weird to me that they describe the races in such a rigid way. Like, when I saw that there was these space hippo dudes, I was so excited, and then you get into the explanation and you find out they're like these gun-obsessed weird military dudes, and they're described like all GIF are that way, and it's just kind of a bummer. But then you turn the page and the plasmoids don't have any of that, and they're just described very forthrightly. I don't know if that's really any better, but there's not this weird cultural stuff associated with an entire race, which I think is one of the big problems. Anyway, I think that's all I'm going to say on the subject. Don't even bother commenting, telling me that I'm wrong about race stuff. If you feel like D&D shouldn't be inclusive and make every type of person feel welcome at the table, then, this channel's not for you. You should just leave. Anyway, let's talk about astral adventuring. This is the section that goes into like how gravity and air works on these crazy spaceships, how outer space in D&D works. It's kind of a cool fantasy version that, makes breathing and travel make sense. There's fish suits instead of space suits. And there's the spelljamming helm, which is how these ships are piloted. Talking about rules and some of the ship-to-ship combat, which I think has a lot of people upset, but you know what? I actually like that there's only a few pages of rules. I think it kind of covers everything that I would need to run this stuff. The distance things are a little confusing to me, but that's just because numbers are a little confusing to me. And I know a lot of people are upset about this little box that basically says that, hey, ship-to-ship combat isn't that interesting. You should try to get close so players can board other ships. And you know what? I actually understand that because players have all of their cool abilities that they want to use. And, you know, that doesn't mean that having a bombard ship with a giant cannon on it isn't awesome and you want to shoot the giant cannon a bunch. But yeah, I don't know. I think there's all the rules I would need, actually more rules, like each weapon has its own little stat block. So this is what the ship layout looks like. So if you have a bombard ship, and I think this is actually great. It's got a little description of the ship, its stats and stuff. Each one, I think there's 16 in here. Each one has cool artwork. This is kind of what I was complaining about in the new starter set. There's the cool ship artwork, and then there's the awesome Dyson logos, you know, very practical black and white blueprint map to go with it. So it's like everything you need right here on one spread. Yeah, there's like a dragonfly ship, a flying fish ship. I mean, there's some real crazy hammerhead ship. These things are crazy, man. I will say my one complaint is that most of the weapons listed on these ships are kind of the same. There's the ballista, like, and the mangonel. Most ships have those, and then, you know, some of them get, like, the nautiloid has the tentacles that can grapple. I wish there were more unique weapons. Like, I think each ship should have a unique weapon, and maybe that would make the space ship-to-ship combat more interesting. But yeah, most of them are just ballista and mangonels. I guess mangonels are like catapults. Giant spider ship, like super cool. Scorpion ship. Of course, you got your space galleon that's just a flying pirate ship. Like, it doesn't even have cannons. Like, why wouldn't a pirate ship have cannons? That's kind of weird, don't you think? So yeah, there's 16 of these bad boys. Star moth, turtle ship. I mean, this stuff is awesome. And then we get into the back of the book, and this is where things get a little confusing to me. So the final section of this book is the Rock of Brawl, which there's a giant map in the back. So if I was a player handed this book and I started reading about the Rock of Brawl, and I actually really love this section. I think it's awesome. And when I was first reading through this book, you know, it gives a little bit of backstory on this city, this like floating city on an asteroid, sort of the political stuff of what's going on. And then it jumps right into the sections of the city. There's the high city, the underbarons, and it just has these little paragraphs that describe these whole areas of the city. It's like, it's just inspiring idea after inspiring idea. Like I was saying, if I was a player handed this book and I was reading through these sections, I would be like, oh yeah, I want to be from the underbarons and be associated with this group and all of this stuff. But like the middle city and the low city, there's just all these cool places. There's a tavern called the Happy Beholder that has this large Luigi beholder that's a big friendly beholder that, you know, has a bunch of information on everything that's going on in town. Like, just super cool stuff. But you'll see when we jump into the other books that it just feels a little bit misplaced that this city is in the player-facing book. It feels like this signature of pages should be taken out of this book and put into another one. One thing, though, is it comes with this giant map that looks totally awesome. To me, it reminds me of a giant map you would get with an old PC role-playing game. You know, it has that kind of aesthetic to it, which I think really lends itself to these Spelljammer books. And the map is definitely cool enough that if you wanted to bust it out on the table and run a whole campaign solely in this Rock of Brawl city, you absolutely could. And I think the little section here at the end of the Astral Adventures Guide is really all a dungeon master needs to plan their own adventure in this cool city. I really like how everything is described in that section. It just feels a little weird that it's in the player-facing book. Okay, let's take a look at Boo's Astral Menagerie. This is the monster manual, and I guess I should say, now that we're looking at this awesome Justin Gerard illustration, this is probably, man, I love this. Just the colors, and it just looks so great. It's got the little miniaturized giant space hamster there. As we flip through this monster manual, let's talk about the production of these books, because I'm a little bit of a book nerd. These books have a sort of different matte lamination on the covers. Like the actual box is more like the other books. There's a nice matte quality to the covers of these 3 books, and I don't know if it's because they're shorter, but the paper is thicker. I just think these 64-page books are like nicer to hold. I really like the production of these things. All of the artwork is really great. Design-wise, I think there is a little bit of a disconnect with, the layout and everything is very Dungeons and Dragons, but the theme of this, in the next book, they mention everything being inspired by Flash Gordon, and I feel like this cosmic horror doesn't look very Flash Gordon inspired. And that applies to kind of everything. Like, the layout of these books is very standard, and I feel like it could have been pushed, could have been a little flashier. Even like the logos and stuff, like the old Spelljammer logo was so cool, but they're sticking with D&D. It's D&D. Now, all that being said, this book is just, it's basically just your resource at the table for monsters, and it does expand a little bit on some of the player races. So GIF have a section because you're going to be running into a bunch of GIF, just like the GIF Yankee. There's lots of good stuff. It is what you would expect from a D&D monster book. And you know what? I actually think it's cool having these 3 books split up. They're each 64 pages. It could have been one big book, but I think I personally like having 3 books because, like I said, you could hand the adventurer's guide to the adventurers, and then you can have your separate monster manual hidden away. The plasmoids, I think I would definitely play a plasmoid if I was a player in a Spelljammer game. These Sirlons, like, these things are look at I know that makes the price of the books a little bit more. Solar dragons, super awesome. Look at that artwork. It's a dragon born in a sun, basically. Really cool. But space clowns, that's a weird one. See, it's tonally, I know I'm kind of jumping all over the place talking about design and format and then the story of things, but space clowns, super interesting, weird, like drug addicted bay people. I don't know. It's weird. There's wacky stuff in this. And, the design and the illustration doesn't tell you that. So there's a little bit of a disconnect on the sort of theme and tone of Spelljammer that I think is very cool and a nice addition to D&D. Vampirates that are actually more like zombies than vampires mixed with pirates, like, I don't know, that's awesome. Now let's jump into the light of Xerxes. This is what I'm talking about right here, right? We open up to the page 6, Adventure Inspiration. It's inspired by the 1980 film Flash Gordon and serialized Flash Gordon comic strips from the 1930s, okay? Wacky movie. Makes sense that there are zombie pirates and weird worm aliens and stuff. But then when you look at this cover, don't get me wrong, this art is awesome. It just doesn't quite fit with that Flash Gordon tone. You know what I'm saying? Like, this is the main bad guy and his solar dragon of this adventure. And there's that disconnect, Now, that being said, I think if you are a dungeon master that is used to running the sort of linear D&D style adventures, this one is awesome, okay? Now, like I've been saying, there's the disconnect. If you are running this adventure, I would not hand the adventurer's guide to your players because the way this one starts, and I think it's an awesome start, is these astral elves have they're living in a dying galaxy, and they have these seeds that they drop onto planets that like totally consume all of the energy from planets, so that these astral elves can like maintain their empire, right? This is where the adventure starts. You've got your regular old level 5 D&D party. Maybe they're on the Sword Coast somewhere or in some like normal fantasy area. It suggests a port town because you need to get onto a ship. People are whispering about meteors coming down, and then all of a sudden these giant crystal vines start sprouting up, like 1,000-foot tall crystal vines just start ruining the city, and it's in chaos, and you have to escape. And this adventure is all about you trying to get to the bottom of what's going on and saving your home world. And I think it's almost more fun if your players don't know you're about to jump into a crazy Spelljammer game. They get done with whatever their level 1 through 5 adventure is, and then all of a sudden these crazy crystals start popping up. They meet this pirate lady. You got to fight your way back onto her ship that takes off into outer space. Like, so cool. There's a stinking pirate flump that pilots the ship into outer space. Like, it's really, really awesome. All of a sudden you're on this Dark Star ship, you know, in outer space. Like that is a great way to surprise your players and get them excited about the next leg of their adventure. So I think the one cool thing about the layout of this book is that everything is divided into chapters. So there's 4 parts. Each of them have like 3 or 4 chapters, and a chapter is a play session. So if you're used to running these kinds of adventures, you could just read one chapter at a time and kind of keep things going. You know, I think you kind of need players that are willing to go along on the adventure with you, because this is a very linear adventure. It does have a lot of recommendations on how, you know, like if this happens, consider this. If that happens, consider that. But it is a path to follow. And I think that still works because of this sort of Flash Gordon inspiration. You know, each of these chapters ends in, you know, here ends chapter 4, and each of them ends in a sort of cliffhanger, right? And you have these crazy villains that like pop in and out of the adventure, and they say, you know, the most outlandish stuff. You know, you get ambushed by this ruthless Rygar. Her name's Hastane. She rides up on this giant jellyfish, and she's got a golden trident, and she drops down onto your ship, and you know, it says, "Heading to Topola's tower, are we? I don't think so. My friends in the Xerixian Empire don't want you meddling in their affairs." Like, it's just bonkers. But I don't know. I think it's awesome, right? You find your way to this floating wizard's tower, and she ends up joining your crew. You get a cool wizard on your crew, and you have one of the GIF on your crew and stuff. And then you get one of the zombie vampire pirates to adventure with you. You know, the players are uncovering this mystery as you, the DM, get to like throw all this ridiculous stuff at them. And, you know, there's these evil astral elves are just, you know, the best kinds of villains. I will say, while I like the chapter layouts, this definitely isn't the type of adventure that you can sit down and just run with the book sitting there. You do have to kind of prepare chapter by chapter. I think that's just how these D&D books are. It's not really my preference. I would much rather take an area like Doom Space. This is basically a whole solar system where the star has died, and there's all these moons. There's 9 moons of N. Like, this section is really cool. It has these little descriptions, and it would be fun to kind of like, you know, figure out what's going on here and then how the players can affect this area. And while you absolutely can do that, this book isn't really presented like that. There's a whole arena of blood. You get to fight in this crazy like aliens fighting pit kind of thing, and then the evil elf guy at the end comes crashing through the ceiling, and you know, all your plans are mixed up in crazy cliffhangers and stuff. Like, I don't know. I think it's a very cool adventure. At this point, I'm kind of rambling on. So what do I think of these 3 books? Well, if it isn't clear, I am conflicted about them. I think there's tons of awesome stuff. I think the setting is very cool. I wish the theme came through a little more in the design and presentation of the books. That's not to say that the design and presentation of these books isn't really good. I just think they could have pushed it further. And you know what? I think that's kind of my general thought on a lot of these D&D books is I wish they would push it further. So instead of complaining and talking bad about all these books down in the comments, I think they deserve to be looked critically at, not just trashed on like I've seen around a lot. And reading through them, I've learned a lot about how I want to present my adventures and how I want to run my games. And there's tons of stuff to steal from these three books. And that's kind of how I interact with these D&D books these days is what can I steal? You know, what can I steal and make cooler for my games? So instead of putting a bunch of negative comments down below this video, I think, why don't you recommend some more space tabletop games? Because I'm looking at my shelf back there and I don't have many. You know, it looks like Mothership is the only space game I have. What space game should I check out? Okay, if you like this video and would like to support my channel or are interested in the types of adventures that I write and illustrate and design, check out my Patreon, linked down in the description. Every month I release a new zine. Sometimes it's an adventure, sometimes it's a collection of magic items like this one. This month I'm working on my own Ghostbusters style game. I put a lot of work into these zines. I'm very proud of how they turned out. So if that's something you're interested in, check it out. All right, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. See ya.